Hello dear students, welcome to the CSAT Comprehension Analysis for Prelims 2023. Now I know all of you would have mustered a lot of courage to go and write your CSAT paper because of how difficult the GS1 paper turned out to be. Now when you are facing this paper, one thing that is a huge relief in your CSAT comprehension paper is the fact that in comparison to the last few years, the question paper or the number of questions has remained fairly standard. If you look at the comprehension side, you have questions in the range of almost 28 to 30 coming in, and here also we have had almost 27 comprehension related questions. So that is a safe number, but as a slight advantage, or not even an advantage, slight relief to the aspirants this time, the comprehension questions are fairly simple. I wouldn't call it easy to a very, you can just, it's a no-brainer kind of questions. That is not the idea. The idea is that these are questions that could be, if you have a focus reading once, you will end up with more or less the correct answers. Even if there are ambiguous choices, the number of questions which turned out to be ambiguous are very less in comparison with the last year's paper. If you look last year, the number of ambiguous questions featured somewhere between 5 to 8. These were huge numbers because it actually created a lot of confusion in the minds of aspirants. This year, if you look at it, the maximum number of ambiguous questions in your CSAT area is around 2 to 3. That's it. Not more than that. So now, without much delay, I think this is the only, after the entire debacle that was the Prelims 2023, this is one element of relief that you all can be happy about. Let's start discussing the comprehension questions. Let's first discuss the paper that we have chosen for discussion is Set B. I want you to note it down again. It's Set B. So we are going in the order of the questions in Set B. So with that, let's start the first thing. We're talking about question number 1. The question entirely deals with subparts of segregation of municipal waste. They're talking about recycling in it. The key points to be noted, and this is something that I've always advised my students also. First, look at what they're trying to ask you. Here, they're asking the following assumptions that have been made before this passage has been written. So, as been taught in the class, assumptions are something that you keep in mind before you write a passage. Let's try looking into it. Once we go through the entire passage, what tries to fit in, one thing that keeps very clearly coming back into our mind is these both statements which they have mentioned cannot be any kind of assumptions related to it. Because the first statement says collection, processing and segregation of municipal waste should be with government agencies. This is a very generalistic assumption to be made. Nowhere in the passage, and in fact, if you look at carefully in the passage, one thing which says is these recycling or whatever activity is happening right now is undertaken by municipal bodies. Municipal bodies are government bodies. So to say that they should be taken up with government agencies is not an accurate assumption to be made. So your first statement is not correct. Second one, resource recovery and recycling require technological inputs that can be best handled by private sector enterprises. Again, this is an assumption that has no relation whatsoever to the passage. So here you can very clearly say, out of all these two given, both 1 and 2 are not related to the passage. So the answer to this, which of the assumptions given above is or are correct? The answer is neither 1 nor 2. So I repeat, in Set B, the first question of comprehension, which is question number 1, the answer is B. Moving on to the second question, which is related to this paragraph itself. The question asks, which one of the following statements best reflects the crux of the passage? Again, this is something I had mentioned where I am saying crux. The idea is not that you read one half here and find an idea. You read the entire passage, sit back for a moment, think what exactly they're trying to convey over here. Now, crux is just the idea that they conveyed. In a lot of other passages that we'll see, we're going to see message. Message again is something I had told you. It's like some kind of what you say, as an at the end of a moral science story, you will get a moral related to it. Similar to that is what a message is. Here in the case of crux, generation of energy from municipal solid waste is inexpensive. This is not anything related to the crux. It's related to a general, what you say, idea that is there. This is clearly eliminatable. Biomethanation is the most ideal way of generating energy from municipal solid waste. Again, understand this. Here, biomethanation has been mentioned because the biodegradable component of India's municipal solid waste is little over 50%. In that case is where biomethanation is a good solution. But that doesn't mean biomethanation is a general solution that is available. So that is not the crux of the entire passage. So the answer, that one is also wrong. Moving to the next one, segregation of municipal solid waste is the first step in ensuring the success of waste to energy plants. So if you are having a little bit doubt, keep it there. Read the fourth statement. The biodegradable component of India's municipal solid waste is not adequate to provide energy from waste efficiently or effectively. If it's not adequate, why would they suggest biomethanation as a method in the passage itself? So on clear elimination, you can go for C as the answer. So the answer to the second question in set B is 2C. Moving on, this is the third passage or the third question that we are going to discuss. In the question paper also, it's question number 3. Let's read the passage quickly. The entire passage deals with the idea that there is a claim that organic farming is inherently safer and healthier. But the entire passage goes about and says that that cannot be the thing. The reality is that organic farming industry is young, not well regulated. Then farmers are confused as to what products. Then they're giving an example for that. Then they're saying about how, for example, if it's not that example thing, the Datura plant spray, which is there, if it's not applied properly, what it can have. Unfortunately, how much and when to use it are not well researched or regulated issues. So after the initial part, the passage has jumped into substantiating the initial idea that is given in the passage. Okay, not more, nothing else is extra added over there. Now, coming into the question. Based on the above passage, the following assumptions have been made. This is the first part. Organic farming is inherently unsafe for both farmers and consumers. Farmers and consumers need to be educated about eco-friendly food. We're talking about the third question here. When you read the entire passage, they are only talking about farmers in the first place, and they're talking about organic farming. The organic farming is inherently unsafe for both farmers and consumers is not an assumption that is made before writing the passage. What is being assumed is that if you don't have proper knowledge about organic farming, that can be the unsafe thing. So here, one is wrong. Second is also not an assumption that can be made. So the answer to the third question with relation to that passage is D, neither 1 nor 2. Moving on to the fourth question related to that same passage. Which one of the following statements best reflects the most logical, rational and practical? See, now logical and rational, we've made our peace with it because we've seen that coming in a lot of the CSAT papers. But when they say practical, now that is almost because at the end, when you have a confusion between two options, always think which is the one that can be implemented on a practical level, and that will be your correct answer. So please don't ignore these words. Here you will see most logical, rational and practical message conveyed by the author in the passage. So we are looking for the most practical message. Let's read the statements. First one says, in India, organic farming should not be promoted as a substitute for conventional farming. In the first place, this is not something that the passage tries to put forward. The passage actually is there because we need organic farming, but we are not able to do it properly. That is the very existence of the passage, right? This passage would not have been written if organic farming was something that we could have easily let gone of. This passage is there because there is a need for organic farming. So here, the first one is a wrong idea. Second one, there are no safe organic alternatives to chemical fertilizers. Very generalized statement, and it is not a practical message that is conveyed by the passage. In India, farmers need to be guided and helped to make their organic farming sustainable. So far, this is a perfect fit because this exemplifies everything that was mentioned in the passage. It also shows the idea that it has a sort of a message. They are not saying like, okay, get rid of organic farming. We don't need organic farming. That is not the idea. They say that, see, we have to work with organic farming. We have to make it better. So, keep 3 on hold. Read the 4th one. The aim of organic farming should not be to generate huge profits, as there is still no global market for its products. That is on any level, if you look at it, the passage does not deal with that idea, and it would be a very wrong statement to say, keeping in mind the actual reality also. So even if you don't bring in the actual reality of things, if you look at the passage alone, they are not hitting upon this. And obviously, when you have a much better answer in 3, you don't have to be bothered about a much more clumsier version like a 4th statement. So here you can go for C. The answer for the 4th question over here is C. Moving on to the 5th question. The 5th question deals with food consumption patterns. Food consumption patterns have changed substantially in India over the past few decades, and they're talking about how many nutritious foods like millets have disappeared. They're saying food grain production has increased over 5 times since independence, but it has not sufficiently addressed the issue of malnutrition. For long, the agriculture sector focused on increasing food production, particularly staples, which led to lower production and consumption of indigenous traditional crops and food grains, etc. Further, this is the point that you have to look over here. Further, intensive monoculture agriculture practices can perpetuate the food and nutrition security problem. What is the idea of perpetuate? They are not going to get rid of it. They'll keep on repeating it. They'll keep on getting it worse. So monoculture is not the way to go, is something that is being said in the passage itself. By degrading the quality of land, water and food derived from them. Now look at the statements. This is the 5th question in set B. Based on the above passage, the following assumptions have been made. To implement the Sustainable Development Goals and to achieve Zero Hunger Goal, monoculture agriculture practices are inevitable, even if they do not address malnutrition. Absolutely wrong idea, goes against the idea that is mentioned in the paragraph. You can easily eliminate it. Thankful to us, all the elimination that didn't come about in your GS1 have a scope over here. So if you look, when 1 is out, you are left with only options B and C. And fortunately for us, C, that is 3rd one, features in both. Let's read the 3rd one. Government policies regarding food planning need to incorporate nutritional security. So that is clearly there. Now the choice is between 2 and 4. Dependence on a few crops has negative consequences for human health and ecosystem. For the present monoculture, then this is the 4th statement. For the present monoculture agriculture practices, farmers receive subsidies in various ways, and government offers remunerative prices for grains, and therefore they do not tend to consider crop diversity. See, as much as we would like to indulge and put our all the knowledge that we know over here, when you have 2nd and 4th, the 2nd is a more generalistic idea that has some bearing on the passage. The 4th one has taken it too much over. What they've done is they've conveyed the same idea, but then they've added so much of logic and everything into it. So now here you can easily say in the 5th question, the answer is B, which is 2 and 3. Okay, so this is the answer of the 5th question in set B. Moving on. Now we're going to discuss the 11th question in set B. The 11th question in set B is related to the passage to tackle the problem of pollution in cities. Now, this is a passage that has gone into detail and tried to say that, okay, we've had so many different methods of pollution, but are they actually good? So let's try to explore what all have they compared over here. They've compared ideas like, for example, drastic actions like temporary use of odd even, closing schools, factories, construction work activities, banning the use of certain type of vehicles are a way forward. So they think that's fine. But even then, the air is not clean. Vehicles more than 15 years old comprise 1% of the total, and taking them off the roads will not make any difference. So they're saying recalling vehicles will not have any impact. Banning certain fuels and car types arbitrarily also is not proper. Can you see how repeatedly they keep using this idea of arbitrariness? Recalling vehicles, diesel engines produce more. The entire passage, here again the word comes, arbitrary bans on vehicles that have passed mandated fitness tests are not fair. They are unfair. So finally it goes on to say what is needed is scientific and reliable information about the source of the pollutants on continuing basis and technologies that will work to reduce pollution from them. So this is how the passage ends. The question asks, which one of the following statements best reflects the most logical and rational implication conveyed by the passage? Implication always is like an effect of the passage. Let's try to look over here. Arbitrary curbs on vehicles to reduce pollution are difficult to implement. That is not the case. They are implementing it. That is why we have the passage. Knee-jerk reactions cannot solve the problem of pollution, but an evidence-based approach will be more effective. So we have a statement that can fit into the bill, but let's keep it there. A heavy penalty should be enforced on those driving without periodic pollution tests. As much as it's a very, wishful thinking, it is not related to the contents of the passage. The heavy penalty or anything is not something that is being exemplified in the passage at all. In the absence of laws to deal with problems of pollution, the administration tends to make arbitrary decisions. So now you've two answers over here, two statements that can come closer. So let's try to understand which of this is an implication. Implication is actually something, I wouldn't call it a message, but then something of, once you read the entire thing, what does it actually mean or what does it imply? The idea is what does it actually give off? So look at all of this. In the absence of laws to deal with the problems of pollution, the problem with that statement is there. Here on all of these things, they're talking about drastic actions or even tackle the pollution. In the absence of laws is not something that is being mentioned anywhere. On the other hand, knee-jerk reactions cannot solve the problem of pollution, but an evidence-based approach will be more effective. So you have two statements over here, and the one which is a bit more fitting is your 11th one, which is B. The answer to the 11th question is B, the logic being provided because in the absence of laws to deal with problems of pollution, the administration tends to make arbitrary decisions. The administration over here is not separated from any of the activities. They are saying they have not commented on the laws. What they've tried to say is that whenever there's a problem of pollution, there is a reaction to it. This is the only thing that is conveyed in the passage. And that is what is implied in the passage. Therefore, we go for B option. Now, moving on to the 12th question in set B. The passage talks about good corporate governance. Let's try reading the passage once. Good corporate governance structures encourage companies to provide accountability and control. A fundamental reason why corporate governance has moved on to economic and political agenda worldwide has been the rapid growth in international markets. Effective corporate governance enhances access to external financing by firms, leading to greater investment, higher growth and employment. Investors look to place their funds where the standards of disclosure of timely and accurate financial reporting and of equal treatment to all stakeholders are met. So they're talking primarily about your corporate governance, and they're talking about how or what is the impact of it. Which of the following statements best reflects the logical inference from the passage given above? It is an important agenda of the countries around the world to ensure access to good external financing. That is not something that is clearly explicitly mentioned in the passage. What is mentioned in the passage is effective corporate finance or corporate governance will help you get external financing. So this can be eliminated. Good corporate governance improves the credibility of firms. While that is one part of the passage, it is clearly mentioned in the passage itself. It is not an inference that is being made. So keep that there. Let's see if there's a better one related to it. International capital markets ensure that the firms maintain good corporate governance. So again, this is an inference that can be formed from the passage which is there. In the passage, they're just mentioning about the international capital market. There has been a rapid growth. They're just conveying that, okay, corporate governance has grown because of international capital markets. Here, they are trying to say that, yeah, it ensures something like this. So this is a much more well-fitting option over here. Finally, good corporate governance paves the way for robust supply chains is not anything that is being mentioned. So the answer to the 12th question in set B is C option. Now, moving on to the 13th question. Interesting question has an environmental thing also. Let's read the passage. The 13th question, which is here. Elephants are landscape architects, creating clearings in the forest, preventing overgrowth of certain plant species and allowing space for the regeneration of others, which in turn provides sustenance to other herbivorous animals. Elephants eat plants, fruits and seeds, propagating the seeds when they defecate in other places as they travel. Elephant dung provides nourishment to plants and animals and acts as a breeding ground for insects. In times of drought, they access water by digging holes which benefit other wildlife. So be it your biodiversity, nutrition, water, everywhere, elephants are, and they're called as landscape architects. So basically meaning that they have such an influence on all the areas around. The question says, which one of the following statements best reflects the most logical and rational inference that can be drawn from the passage? Let's read the statements one by one. The home range of elephants needs to be a vast. Now again, look at the 4 statements without even thinking about an answer. They have used terms which you as an environment student or a student who will have a basic information of environment will be exposed to when you study GS1. So understand that it is not something that is totally, restricted to the passage over here. The home range of elephants needs to be a vast area of rich biodiversity. Here they are saying elephants are influencing biodiversity. So to say that, okay, elephant will live only in areas which are biodiverse is not aligned with the idea of the passage. This is a wrong one. Elephants are the keystone species and they benefit the biodiversity. That fits well. Let's keep it there. Rich biodiversity cannot be maintained in the forest without the presence of elephants. That is on an environment level, on a logical level. This is the point. A logical and rational level, that is not a correct inference that you can make. Because, come on, there are so many areas in the world where there is no where there is extremely rich biodiversity, but without the presence of elephants. So, how can you make these two together in that sense and make it like a limiting condition in that statement? So, C gets eliminated. Elephants are capable of regenerating forests with species as per their requirement. Elephants are not magicians. That is not the idea that is conveyed in the passage. Elephants, with whatever existing landscape that is there, they enrich that existing landscape. It's not like, okay, elephant is there, so that area did not have a tiger, so suddenly tiger will start coming. That is not the idea. So again, here, I won't say you have to use your environment knowledge. It just means that you have to use the understanding of these terms. See, you are expected to know what a keystone species is. You are expected to know what home range is. So UPSC has put this question with the assumption that you know it. So the answer to this question is B. Elephants are the keystone species and they benefit the biodiversity. So here the answer to the 13th question is B. Elephants are the keystone species. Moving on to the next question, which is the 21st question. The emissions humans put into the atmosphere now will affect the climate in the middle of the century and onwards. Technological change, meanwhile, could make a future transition away. So they're talking about technological change over here, and they're saying it could make a future transition away from fossil fuels cheap, or it might not, leaving the world with a terrible choice between sharply reducing emissions at huge cost or suffering through the effects of unabated warming. Businesses that do not hedge against the threat of uncertain outcomes fail. The world cannot afford such recklessness on climate change. So they're saying you have to be very careful about climate change, and they're also saying that if you have technological innovations, maybe some of these things or the transitions which are there will be much more simpler. Which one of the following statements best reflects the crucial message conveyed by the author of the passage? Businesses that cause emissions may need to close down or pay for pollution in the future. The closing down, these aspects are not, they're saying they have to pay for it. The payment over here is not in the literal sense of it. It's more of a metaphorical thing that is being mentioned. So it will not be A. The only solution is technological development related to the issues of climate change. So the only solution is being mentioned. Waiting to deal with carbon emissions until technology improves is not a wise strategy. That is the C option. Since future technological change is uncertain, new industries should be based on renewable energy sources. See, what is uncertain is not future technology change. What is uncertain is the effect of future technology change. They're not saying technology change will not happen. They're saying technology change will happen. But will they be able to make an effect or not is the question. So, since future technological change is uncertain is a wrong idea. That is not conveyed in the passage. So, here A is gone, B is gone, B and C is there. B is already gone because of the only solution that is being mentioned. Now, finally, even though you're not so happy or you might not be totally convinced with the answer, based on all the other logical things that is being considered, the answer to the 21st question will be C. I hope until now you guys are doing a good job. I hope those who relied on English comprehension to qualify the CSAT paper are on a roll at this point and are doing well. Moving on to the next question, which is the 22nd question. We are talking about environmental problems cause health problems. This is, again, I have to tell you, this is one of those ambiguous questions which are there. There has been a lot of discussion surrounding this 22nd question. I'll put forward both the arguments to you and I'll tell you the both statements that we are going on with. So let's go into it. Environmental problems cause health problems. That's very clear now. Because they have mentioned in the passage, substantial changes in lifestyle can reduce environmental or health problems. But this idea appears almost impossible to adopt. With environmental problems, individual efforts can be perceived as having a negligible effect and therefore lead to inertia. So, environment problems nobody is solving. With health, on the other hand, individual choices can make the difference between life and death, literally. And yet, barring a few, there seems to be the same collective lethargy towards making their choices. So, the idea is, environmental problems cause health problems. That is already mentioned. Then the idea is, we could actually do something about both of these problems, but we are not doing anything against both. And thus, we are in this very collective lethargy against both environmental problems and health problems. Looking at the statements, which one of the following statements best implies the most rational assumption that can be made from the passage? Assumption. Assumption, again, I've told you, they will not directly mention assumption there in big bold letters. It's a thought that you keep in your mind before you write the passage. So, look at all of these things. A statement says we are likely to spend more money on cure than prevention. That can very well be the answer, for the reason being that the entire idea, being environment or health, tries to convey, and when I'm saying cure and prevention over here, it is not on the aspect of health that they are talking. We all know the quote, which is prevention is better than cure, right? The passage over here that is being, or the statement which is said over here, we are likely to spend more money on cure than prevention, tries to exemplify the idea that, okay, we are not caring about prevention, so we might end up having much more huge losses. So keep that in your mind. It is the job of the government to solve our environment and public health problems. No, that is not an assumption that is made anywhere or can be formed. See, always, if you want to think of an assumption, you read this first statement and then you read the entire passage. It has to be coherent. This is not coherent. Health can be protected even if environmental problems go on unattended. So you all know this is the next option that is contentious with this thing. Here they're saying health can be protected because in the case of environment, it requires larger number of people. There's a lot of collective effort needed. For health, it is individual effort that is needed. So here health can be protected even if environmental problems go on unattended. The only argument against this is the first line, which says environmental problems cause health problems. So to say health can be protected without environment being or attended to is a idea that negates the idea given in the passage. But there has been a lot of discussion. Both A and C options are contentious over here. Laws of traditional lifestyle and the influence of Western values, and again leads to unhealthy ways of living, not on the running over here. So though I do feel it could lead more towards A, I am presenting it before you as two ambiguous options. A or C could very well be the answer for this. So keep it like that, and those who wrote both, those who wrote C or A stand to be, benefited from it. Hopefully A. Okay. Moving on to the next passage, which is 23rd. The 23rd passage or 23rd question reads as, many people are not eating the right food. For some, it is simply a decision to stick with food they enjoy, but which is not too healthy. This is leading to an increase in the non-communicable diseases. This in turn leads to major burden on our healthcare systems that have the potential to derail the economic progress, which is essential for the poor to improve their lives. Like, look at it, because some people do not have the right food and they're going about and eating whatever they want. Look at all the impact that has been created is the first part. Second part is, for others, it is about limited access to nutritious food, or limited access to nutritious food, or a lack of affordability leading to monotonous diets that do not provide the daily nutrients for them to develop fully. Part of the reason nutrition is under threat worldwide is that our food systems are not properly responding to nutritional needs. Food systems are not properly responding to nutritional needs. Basically meaning we are not eating food based on our nutritional requirements. Somewhere along that long road from farm to fork, there are serious detours taking place. Now the question over here is, they're saying there are serious detours taking place. Is it a personal choice that is taking the detour? No. In the first case, it might be a personal choice, but in the second case, it is not a personal choice that they cannot afford the food. So now let's look into the statements which are provided. Which one of the following statements best reflects the crux of the passage? First one. So crux, again, you get it. It's the gist of the passage. The scheme of universal basic income should be implemented worldwide as a way of poverty elevation. What a very wishful, broad idea to be conveyed, not the crux of the passage at all. We must place food-based nutrition at the center of our policy debate. This fits into the entire idea. We'll come back to it. Let's read the other statements. Nutritional status of food should be improved by creating appropriate genetically modified crops. This is giving a very specific suggestion. And that is not something that we can go forward, because that is not the entire idea. They're saying there are serious detours. There can be several detours, right? It can be the fact that, okay, we are not focused on GMOs. The next one, using modern food processing technologies, we must fortify food items with required nutritional elements. That is also a way to go. Like, you can have GMOs, you can have fortification, you can have HYVs, high yielding varieties of seeds. To have all of this, what should be the crux? The crux is, in our policies, there should be the idea of food-based nutrition. So, because it is a much more apt option, the 23rd question's answer is option B. We must place food-based nutrition at the center of our policy debate. Moving on to the 31st question. The 31st question reads as, they're talking about conflicts, and this is one of those passages which I would say anyone who's at the end who's going to prepare for your mains, it conveys a lot of beautiful ideas in a very simple manner. So you can use this passage to enrich your notes. Like, let's look into it. We often hear about conflicts among different states in India over river waters. Of the 20 major river systems, 14 are water stressed. 75% of the population lives in water stressed regions, a third of whom live in the water scarce areas. Keep a note of it. Next year, it might come as a GS1 question, just like they asked the groundwater question, which was there. Climate change, the demands of rising population, and the need for agriculture to keep pace, and increased rate of urbanization, industrialization. Look at all the demands which are there. These are all going to exacerbate the water stress. According to the Constitution of India, water is a state subject and not that of the Union, except for the regulation of interstate rivers. Key to ensuring balance between competing demands of various stakeholders is a basin-based approach to allocate water amongst constituent regions and states. Allocating fair share of water to them requires assessments based on objective criteria such as specificities of the river basin, size of the population, existing. A lot of factors have been said over here, while ensuring that the environmental needs of the water of the river and the aquifers. Look at the question. Which one of the following statements best reflects the most rational, practical, and immediate action required? Immediate action. Immediate means it's not something like saying that, okay, let's improve all the water content of the rivers in India. That is not an immediate thing. You cannot do it in the next 2 years. Got it? So, immediate action required to ensure fair, this is the next part, required to ensure fair and equitable allocation of water to different stakeholders. Look at all the options being given over here. First one, a national, pragmatic, legal and policy framework for water allocation should be made. As far as we know, we can make policies very quickly. It is an immediate solution. It is both a logical and rational. The only argument against it is the fact of the national one which is said, but again understand the passage tries to put forward the idea of river basin management. If you have to have the idea of river basin management, it cannot be entrusted within individual states, because river basin means the entire area around it. You will have several states coming in. For that, you will require a center's power over there or a national law. So keep that in mind. All river systems of the country should be linked and huge aquifers created. Very impractical solution. We've already established the river systems of the country are mostly water stressed. So to interlink all of them is not going to be a practical solution. Water channels between regions of water surplus and regions of water deficit should be created. This is again one thing that can be considered, but again look at the entire thing. They're saying the most rational, practical and immediate action. Water channels between regions of water surplus. When you read the passage, you do understand there are no regions of water surplus. The only problem is in the existing area, with the necessary population, how is the water stress impacted? This is what the passage entirely deals about. They're not talking about, okay, that river has more water, so let's take the water over here. So this is not a very well refined idea that is there. Finally, to mitigate water crisis, water demand of sectors such as agriculture, industry should be reduced. That is an impractical solution for a developing country like India. So out of all the 4 options, the given options, the most logical, pragmatic option that we can go for is A. So the answer to the 31st question is A. Moving on to the next question. The next question is question 32. Question 32 deals with some of the factors. Like if you've read the GS1 paper, you have Anemia Mukt Bharat mentioned over there. Here you have the explanation for it like that given over here. More than half of the Indian women and almost a quarter of Indian men of working age suffer from anemia. According to studies, there are anywhere between 5 to 15 less productive than they could be as a result thereof. India also has largest tuberculosis burden in the world, costing 170 million in value. It is becoming increasingly clear that on many measures, we are having, or the cognitive ability of malnourished Indian children, they tend to be 2 to 3 times worse than adequately nourished peers. And this is the key, this is the part that has to be read carefully. For an economy that will be more dependent on highly skilled workers, for an economy that will depend on highly skilled workers, this poses a significant challenge. And it is one that really should be addressed given India's demographic outlook. Which one of the following statements best reflects what is implied by the passage? Educational system must be strengthened in rural areas. Rural, urban, anemia is happening everywhere, tuberculosis is happening everywhere, malnourishment might be happening more in rural areas, but this is a very generalistic statement, not fitting over here. Large scale and effective implementation of skill development program is the need of the hour. Talking about how non-communicable diseases, communicable diseases and cognitive disorders are leading to people not actually being able to perform well. So here skill development is not the point that is being raised. So again, this is gone. For economic development, health and nutrition of only skilled workers needs special attention. The entire passage says if you need skilled workers, you have to focus on health and nutrition. It's not that, okay, you create skilled workers and you focus on their health and nutrition. What is the entire point of a developing country then? So this entire passage's idea is not on line with C. The answer to this question over here is, for rapid economic growth as envisaged by us, attention should be paid to health and nutrition of the people. This is what is being very simply, fairly squarely implied in this passage. So the answer to the 32nd question is B. Moving over to the 33rd question. The question talks about in India, majority of farmers are marginal and small, less educated, and now they're talking about the adaptation to climate change. So they're saying farmers in India, you cannot expect them to just say, okay, you all adapt to climate change, and autonomous adaptation to climate change. Autonomous means they feel on their own. Oh, okay, fine, climate change is happening. Let me adapt to it. That kind of an adaptation is not something we can expect. Even if it was possible, it would not be sufficient to offset losses from climate change. So autonomous adaptation is not, or adaptation by your own, is out of question here. To deal with this, adaptation to climate change is paramount. Always look over here. It's totally talking about adaptation to climate change. Okay. Alongside a fast mitigation response. Moving over. Another solution is to have a planned or policy-driven adaptation, which would require the government to come up with a policy recommendations. Perception is a necessary prerequisite for adaptation. They're saying that adaptation will happen only if perception is there. Prerequisite means that. So if perception is not there, it directly means adaptation will not happen. Whether farmers are adapting agriculture practices in climate change depends on whether they perceive it or not. However, this is not always enough for adaptation. It is important how a farmer perceives the risks associated with climate change. So they have to perceive both the idea of adaptation and the idea of risk also along with climate change. Then only this entire idea will take or be fruitful. Which one of the following statements best reflects the most logical and rational message conveyed by the author of the passage? Adaptation to climate change and mitigation response are basically the responsibilities of the government. Again, we just read the passage. We are not talking about the government in anything. We are talking purely from the farmer's perspective. This is a wrong idea. Climate change causes a change in government policies regarding land use patterns in the country. Again, when I'm saying message, it's not an assumption. It's not something prior to the passage. It's after reading the passage, what is the idea that you're putting forward? Here, there is no idea about the land use patterns. Risk perceptions of farmers are important for motivating them for taking adaptation decisions. This is a very important idea that is getting conveyed. Let's keep it there. Since mitigation is not possible, government should come up with policies for quick response to climate change. This negates the entire idea of the passage. They are saying mitigation should happen, adaptation should happen. And here we are putting forward the idea, no. Let's do just climate change response. So this is wrong. The answer to the 33rd question is C. So I hope that is clear. Now moving on to the 41st question. Yeah, the 41st question is a quite interesting passage. It's talking about the unemployment problem in India. Let's try to read the passage. In India, while the unemployment rate is a frequently used measure of poor performance of the economy, under conditions of rising school and college enrollment, it paints an inaccurate picture. Okay? So, the rising unemployment rates do not actually mean or show the correct picture of the Indian society is what is they're trying to say. The reported unemployment rate is dominated by the experience of younger Indians who face higher employment challenges. Higher employment challenges are not your entry-level problems wherein you're not able to find a job. The point is you're not able to move ahead with your job. Higher employment challenges and exhibit greater willingness to wait for the right job than their older peers. The unemployment challenge is greater for people with secondary or higher education, and rising educational levels inflate unemployment challenges. Quite a counterintuitive passage because the passage implies that we are having the unemployment problem at this point, or it's a challenge because we are all educated and our aspirations are of a higher level. This is the crux of the passage. Now let's see which one of the following statements most likely reflects as to what the author of the passage intends to say. Intends to say means they have not maybe put it out directly, but that is the idea that they're trying to convey. First one, enrollment in schools and colleges is high, but there is no quality education. That is not anywhere touched upon in this passage. Unemployment must be seen as a function of rising education and aspirations of young Indians. Though I already used the word aspirations when I explained it to you, that is primarily derived from that option B, which is there. Let's keep it there. There are no labor-intensive industries to accommodate the huge number of unemployed people. This is again a problematic statement because they're saying the unemployment problem is with people who have higher, secondary and higher education. The idea of labor-intensive industries will not accommodate people with higher, higher education or secondary education. So here, that again is negating, or it's opposite to the idea that is being conveyed. The education system should be properly designed so as to enable the educated people to be self-employed. Again, that is not something that is conveyed in the passage. They're saying that maybe unemployment problems will not be so much high if we are ready to take up the jobs which are there for us. So, the answer to this question, which is your 41st question, is option B. Moving on to one of the, slightly difficult options or slightly difficult passages which were there today. The 42nd passage, 42nd question. Let's read it in a careful manner. Science by itself is not enough. There must be a force and discipline outside the sciences to coordinate them and point to a goal. It is not possible to run a course right when the goal itself has not been rightly placed. What science needs is philosophy, the analysis of scientific method and the coordination of scientific purposes and results. Without this, any science must be superficial. Government suffers precisely like science. Now, when that is being mentioned, what is being asserted over here is just like science has the problem, okay, government also has the problem. And what is the problem? When you have, think about this, think in a proper manner. Science is what? Science is very empirical, rational, logical things. But they're saying science should be with philosophy. What is the idea that means then? Science should be there, but you should have some guidance to what you're going to. It's not just necessary that you have numbers. You have to have a philosophy as to what the numbers have a goal for. Now, very similar lines they're saying about politics. They're saying that politics should not just be about getting all these different values and different numbers. There should be an inherent goal in what you're trying to achieve in politics. So, the idea is not comparison. They are actually equating both of these things. So, here you will see that government suffers precisely like science for lack of philosophy. Philosophy bears, government suffers precisely like science for lack of philosophy. Philosophy bears to science the same relation which statesmanship bears to politics. Movement should be movements guided by total knowledge and perceptive, as against aimless and individual seeking. Just as the pursuit of knowledge becomes scholasticism when divorced from actual needs of men in life, so the pursuit of politics becomes a destructive bedlam when divorced from science and philosophy. The last statement clearly puts forward the idea that the pursuit of politics becomes a destructive bedlam when divorced from science and philosophy. Got it? So, politics, if it has to reach to very good levels, you need science, which is exemplified as empirical data or empiricism, which is there, and philosophy, which is basically your statesmanship, which they bring into it. Look at all the statements which are there. Which one of the following statements best reflects the most rational, logical, and practical message conveyed by the passage? Okay. Modern statesmen need to be well trained in scientific methods and philosophical thinking to enable them to have a better perspective of their roles, responsibilities, and goals. Modern statesmen need to be well trained in scientific methods and philosophical thinking, better perspective of their roles, responsibilities, and goals. We can keep that there. Going to the next one. It is not desirable to have governments managed by empirical statesmen unless well mixed with others who are grounded in learning and reflect wisdom. They are telling, see, the idea is one person itself should be able to have these ideas together. But here they're saying it is not desirable to have, and here they're trying to give the message also. So it is not desirable to have governments managed by empirical statesmen unless well mixed with others who are grounded in learning and reflect wisdom is a very high-flown idea. We are eliminating it. As the statesmen or bureaucrats are products of a society, it is desirable to have a system of education in a society that focuses on training its citizens in scientific method and philosophical thinking from an very early age. So keep that under consideration. It is desirable that all scientists need to be philosophers as well as to make work goal-oriented. That is gone wrong. So coming to think of it over here, when you look at all the options that are mentioned, you have both A and C closely aligned, but here the better option which happens to come over here, which is the most rational, logical and practical message. Again, understand this practical message again at this point of time after reading the entire passage is not something where we can do it like, okay, philosophical thinking from an early age. You can do it maybe in the long run, but the most practical solution which is there is modern statesmen need to be well trained in scientific methods and philosophical thinking to enable them to have a better perspective of their roles, responsibilities and goals. So this again, the idea that the entire passage conveys is what? You cannot have one thing separated from the other. You cannot have science separated from philosophy. You cannot have politics separated from science or philosophy. Once you have both of it, then your goals become cleared, and thus the answer to the 42nd question is A. Moving on to the 43rd question. Quite an interesting question. The reason being, it's one of the most, the smallest passages which were there in the paper today. And the entire thing talks about the last end of the state. Now think about it. They're saying that the end as in the means and end of the state. The end of the state is not to dominate men, not to restrain them by fear, not to restrain. Rather, it is so to free each man from fear that he may live and act with full security and without injury to himself or his neighbor. Now, here is where you start diverting your thought and bring other thoughts over here, but then stick to what is being mentioned. Not to restrain, keep the person free. The end of the state, I repeat, is not to make rational beings into brute beasts and machines. It's to enable their bodies and minds to function safely. It is to lead men to live by and to exercise a free reason that may not waste their strength in hatred, anger, guile, nor act unfairly towards one another. So, the primary crux of the passage, or based on the above passage, which one of the most following terms best expresses the ultimate goal of the state? The goal of the state or the end of the state is liberty. That is freedom which is there and not any of the other things. They're saying that if you have this, you can have all of the others. Communal harmony, personal safety, etc. So the answer to the 43rd question is D, liberty. Moving on to, I would say, personal favorite. My personal favorite in this entire set of questions was this one passage which was there. This is the 51st question. The paradox of choice is what is being mentioned. It talks about Jean Beriudon. Jean Beriudon is a 14th century philosopher, and he talked about the question of choices. Then it goes on to say, changes in technology and innovation such as smartphones, etc. only exacerbate our glut of choices. Means it increases our glut of choices. It's not just, they're not telling it's just choices. Glut primarily indicates something that is not very desirable. Constant connectivity and overconsumption of real-time data and social media can leave little room for self-reflection and making decisions more difficult. Life is about choices. Many people are overwhelmed with attractive life choices, yet find themselves unhappy and anxious. We're talking about the 51st question of set B. Which one of the following statements best describe or reflects the most logical message implied in the above passage? Let's look at all the options. First one is, modern technology enfeebles societal structure and makes life difficult. Not talking anything about your societal structure over here. This is not a message. Modern life is full of uncertainties and endless difficult choices. Very good observation, and one of the most aligned answers that is there with respect to this passage. We are influenced by the opinion of others and have no courage to follow our own convictions. Not something that is aligned with the content of the passage. Finally, in our lives, having too few choices may not be a good thing, but having too many can be equally as difficult. in this entire thing, they talked about having a lot of choices. They've not touched upon the first part, which says having too few choices. That is something that is clearly outside the ambit of the passage. Here, when you look at it, the most logical message that is related to the passage is with respect to option B. Modern life is full of uncertainties and endless difficult choices. So the answer to the 51st question is D. Moving over to the 52nd and 53rd question. The 52nd question talks about household finance. As you look into the entire passage, I just want you to first read the question. This is one of those simple passages where the question is a fairly direct one. Regarding the financialization of household savings, which of the following statements best reflects the solutions that are implied by the passage? So, the passage has mentioned some solutions. We're trying to get that right. Moving on to the 52nd question, here you will see, a populace accustomed to traditional processes will not simply jump into financialization. Hurdles to change include onerous bureaucracy, skepticism of organized financial institutions, a lack of basic information about which of the myriad services and providers is best for each family, and how, and even if, one can make the transition between them if necessary. So these are the different problems that are clearly mentioned, and the solutions which are there should be related to these problems. So now the first one says a flexible environment is needed to develop solutions. So which means something that is as tedious as a bureaucracy will not be helpful. An onerous bureaucracy will clearly not be helpful. So a flexible environment is needed. Households need customized solutions. This is what is being said. What service or provider is best for each family? So 2 is there. Innovations in financial technology are required. Here in this entire passage, nowhere is this innovation aspect told. They're talking clearly about, with the existing things, how to ensure that people are moving into this financialization thing. So here the answer to this is A, 1 and 2. So the answer to the 52nd question is A. Moving over to the 53rd question. 53rd question over here starts with, they're talking about pharmaceutical patents, grant protection to the patentee. If you read the entire passage which is saying, the first thing that comes over here is you have to maintain between the patent holders, the cost which is there, and the, the money that can be exerted from the consumer. Based on the above passage, the following assumptions have been made. So let's look at it. The first one says patent protection given to patentees puts a huge burden on public's purchasing power in accessing patented medicines. This is an idea that is a clear assumption in this passage, because we are talking about the cost of how you can balance something. What is the reason why we have to balance? If right now the consumer is taking a little bit of hit also, later on they will be benefited. So 1 is clearly there. If 1 is there, you can eliminate C and D in the first place itself. Then moving on, dependence on other countries for pharmaceutical products is a huge burden for developing and poor countries. This is wrong. It's not mentioned. Providing medicines to public at affordable prices is a key goal during public health policy design in many countries. Again, not something that is being mentioned in the passage. This is the reason why I said CSAT is fairly simple for English comprehension this time. The reason being that if you are choosing to attempt and read it in a focused manner, you will clearly have statements which you can easily eliminate. Governments need to find an appropriate balance between the rights of patentees and the requirements of patients. So here you are. The answer for the 53rd question is B, 1 and 4. Moving on to the 54th question. The 54th question is talking about digital economy. India should ensure the growth of digital economy while keeping personal data of citizens secure and protected. And the entire passage, when you read, the question says, based on the above passage, what are the assumptions being made? First, if you go through, this is one of a very simple assumption question. Protection of privacy is not just a right, but it has value to the economy. This is something that is evidently there in the passage. They're talking about the ultimate control and everything, but in the beginning itself, they are saying that no one will innovate in a surveillance-oriented environment. And then they are saying how important innovation is. So the first statement is correct. There is a fundamental link between privacy and innovation. Again, that second statement is also correct. The answer to the 54th question is C. Both of them are valid assumptions that can be made. Now, in the set B, the comprehension passage comes to 61st question. The 61st question tries to somehow put forward the idea of non-agriculture foods also. Let's try looking into that. Sourcing food from non-agriculture lands, that is what is the definition is given over there, in addition to agriculture. In addition to agriculture lands, enables a systematic approach to food consumption. It allows rural, tribal communities to sustain themselves. Then they move on to, since the productivity of trees is often more resilient to adverse weather conditions than annual crops, forest foods often provide a safety net. So they are all putting forward the idea of having much more forest trees out there. Which one of the following statements best reflects the most logical and rational message conveyed in the passage? Food yielding trees should replace other trees in rural and tribal areas. See, here it's very clear they're not saying it should be replaced. They're saying it should go hand in hand. So first option is wrong. Food security cannot be ensured in India with the present practice of conventional agriculture. That again, if take a moment, think of it in a very logical sense. We have achieved food security with the present conventional agriculture. The idea is to ensure more and more people are actually having sustainability in food which is there. So B is not the one. Wastelands and degraded areas in India should be converted into agroforestry systems to help the poor. Again, not something that is fitting with the idea of the passage. Agro ecosystems should be developed in addition to or along with conventional agriculture. So this is a message clearly given. The answer to the 61st question is D. Moving forward to the 62nd and 63rd questions which are there. 62nd questions talks about antibiotics. They're talking about how awareness of misuse and abuse of antibiotics is common knowledge, how pollution from antibiotics is fueling the rise of drug-resistant infections. The question says, which one of the following statements best reflects the most logical and practical message conveyed by the passage? Most logical and practical. See, first let's start from the below. Pharma manufacturing companies should be set up in remote rural areas away from crowded town and cities. What is the idea that is conveyed over this? So let them suffer. We don't want to have in the urban areas and all. That is not a right idea that is conveyed in the passage. That is wrong. Spread of drug-resistant bacteria cannot be done away with, as it is inherent in modern medical care. Though that statement might be true on a science passage which is there, this passage does not put forward that idea. Wrong. It is necessary to promote environmental awareness among people. Now, if you got confused here, this is where you have to read that first thing. While awareness on use and misuse or abuse of antibiotics is common knowledge, awareness is not the problem. Awareness is there. But the problem is some other thing which is there. And thus, the answer to the 62nd question is, it is necessary to put proper effluent treatment protocol in place. So, answer is A. Moving on to the 63rd question. The 63rd question talks about quality education. They're talking about how good quality education accrue only when students complete and leave school after having acquired gateway skills. Gateway skills like basic foundational skills. The advent of knowledge economy poses new challenges, and one of the most severe consequences of having an uneducated workforce will be our inability to keep pace with global economy. Without a strong learning foundation at the primary level, there can be no improvement in higher education or skill development. Here, the passage is quite clear. They're talking clearly about foundational skills, primary education, the basics. First statement says, to become a global power, India needs to invest in universal quality education. This can be considered. Let's keep it there. India is unable to become a global power because it is not focusing. We are looking at the crux of the passage, by the way. India is unable to become a global power because it is not focusing or promoting knowledge economy. The idea is just opposite. You will become a knowledge economy if you have certain factors in place. That is what the passage tries to convey. So it is not B. Our education system should focus on imparting skills during higher education. Clearly not higher education, talking about basic education. Parents of many school children are illiterate and are unaware of the benefits of quality education. That is not an observation that is aligned with the contents of the passage. And because of this, out of all the 4 options, the better option is A. So the answer to the 63rd question is option A. Moving on to the last few set of questions. This is the 71st question in CSAT. The question talks about scientific term called as the vernal window, and they're talking entirely about it, and they're saying with reference to the above passage, the following assumptions have been made. If you look at this passage, it's a very simple, though there are technical terms. The idea is global warming has happened, spring has become all the more a problematic thing, spring has become early and it has become long, and because of this a lot of species are getting affected. Global warming is causing spring to come early for longer duration. That is an assumption that can be made. Early spring and longer period of spring is not good for bird populations. So here, both of these you can say as the answer to the 71st question. The answer to the 71st question is C, option C. Moving on to the 72nd and 73rd question. 72nd question deals with nitrogen use efficiency. They're talking entirely about how all the global average for nitrogen use efficiency is 0.4. More than 40% is added, so that entire pathway is being sent. Plants take the nitrogen they need to grow and excess is left in the ground. So this entire thing is said. Which one of the following statements best reflects the most logical, rational and crucial message implied by the passage? From this entire thing, it's very clear this passage focuses solely on nitrogen efficiency. If you look at the options, conventional agriculture using synthetic fertilizers should be replaced. That is not correct. Alternatives to crops that require excess of nitrogen should be identified and cultivated. Again, these are not the things they're saying. All this is happening, but the nitrogen efficiency is what has to be worked on. So this is wrong. Production of synthetic nitrogen fertilizers cannot be stopped. Synthetic nitrogen fertilizers is not something that is being targeted in this passage or anything. So that will never be the crucial message that is being given. An enhanced efficiency of use of nitrogen is imperative. So the answer to the 72nd question is A. And coming to the final question of your reading comprehension in CSAT, we're talking about climate justice. The passage says, along with sustainable lifestyles, climate justice is regarded as a significant principle in environmental parlance. They are talking about how climate change summits always talk about the consensus which are there. Justice in the judicial sense is well defined. However, in the context of climate change, it has scientific, socio-political connotations. The crucial questions in the next few years will be based on this. Justice in climate is not confined to actions relating to mitigation, but includes the wider notion of support for adaptation to climate change. Which one of the following statements best reflects the most logical, rational and crucial message conveyed by the passage? Climate justice should be ingrained in detail in the rules of all new climate compacts and agreements. This is a clear message that is given. It's a no. This is one of those very simple direct questions which are there. This is the option. You can read through the rest of it. Environmental resources are unevenly distributed and exploited across the globe. This is not a message that is given. It's a fact, but it is not a message with relation to the passage. Maybe if you had to say an assumption question, maybe that would have been correct. There is an impending issue of dealing with a huge number of climate change victims or climate refugees. Again, not an answer. Climate change in all its connotations is mostly due to developed countries, and therefore their share of burden should be more. This entirely goes, they are saying climate justice should be there. They're trying to exemplify this idea. The answer to the 73rd question is A. So with that, we come to an end for the discussion of your CSAT comprehension, reading comprehension area. I hope we have had 27 questions. Those who've got all 27 questions, though we have 2 ambiguous questions which are there, those who've fairly done at least 24 of these questions, 23 or 24 of these questions, along with few logical reasoning and math questions, are bound to be on a safer level. I hope you all are qualifying CSAT at this point. I know even though the GS was not a very heartwarming thing, I hope in this aspect you do qualify, and all the best for the future journey which is there, and I hope you all qualify the CSAT with very good marks. Thank you.